In this video, I'll talk about the beginnings in Greek mythology, the creation. Chaos, a void of nothingness, was all there was in the beginning. Eros, the dazzling god of love and attraction, Tartarus, the vast area beneath the ground, and Gaia, the earth, all emerged from this gigantic void. Chaos also gave birth to night, the darkness over the earth, and Erebus, the gloom of the underworld. Then Erebus dozed off alongside night, who later gave birth to Dea and Ether, the celestial and terrestrial lights, respectively. The entities doom, fate, death, sleep, dreams, nemesis, and a lengthy list of other atrocities that prey upon men in the dark were all created by later night alone. Gaia, in the meantime, gave birth to Uranus, the starry sky, the mountains, and Pontus, the barren sea, all on her own. As he protected Gaia from all angles, Uranus eventually became her partner and equal. The 12 Titans, the 3 imposing Cyclops with wheel-eyed faces, and the 3 terrifying Hecatoncheires with 50 heads and 100 arms, each were created by this primordial coupling of heaven and earth. However, Uranus turned out to be the strict spouse and parent. Each Hecatoncheire despised him, and he despised them all. Uranus threw them back into Gaia's womb and held them there out of his fury. At this, Gaia writhed in agony and decided to exact revenge on her partner. She created a flint sickle and enlisted the help of her other offspring to get revenge. Only the final Titan born, Cronus, had the courage to face their father, who caused the Titans and Cyclops to flee in terror. The cunning Cronus was concealed in an ambush that night when Uranus arrived to lay without Gaia. He took hold of his father's genitalia and used his mother's sickle to cut them off. The ash tree nymphs, the giant race, and the Furies who punished misdeeds were all created at the blood that dripped to the earth. When Cronus cast his crew into the water, the lovely goddess of love Aphrodite emerged from the foam and floated towards Cyprus, where she made landfall. Either the mutilated Uranus died, or he withdrew permanently from the planet. Prior to doing so, he made a promise that Cronus and the other Titans would suffer consequences. Cronus established his rule after relegating the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires to Tartarus. He wed his sister Gaia, and the Titans had a large family during his rule. Cronus, however, was powerless to stop his own children from living, because both Gaia and Uranus were foretold that Cronus would be replaced by a son. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon were all swallowed by Cronus immediately after they were born, when his wife Rhea gave birth to the gods and goddesses. In her rage, Rhea went to great lengths to protect her 6th child, Zeus, from his father. She gave birth to Zeus covertly before giving Cronus a stone to ingest in his place. Zeus developed into a man on Crete under the care of nymphs. Meanwhile, Cronus was becoming older. Zeus asked the Titaness Metis for help in defeating him, and she made an emetic potion. Zeus handed Cronus this elixir while pretending to be a cupbearer, and Cronus promptly puked up Zeus's siblings as well as the stone Rhea had given him. The gods managed to defeat Cronus and imprison him in Tartarus while they were still alive and unharmed. After that, Zeus erected the stone at Perseus as a memorial to his triumph against the Titan king. But Zeus's victory was not guaranteed. With the exception of Prometheus and Oceanus, the other Titans rebelled against these new gods. The fighting universe-shaking conflict in which the forces of nature were raged and brittled continued for 10 years. Neither the gods nor the Titans were able to win by a wide margin, but after that, Zeus descended into Tartarus and let loose the Cyclops and the creatures with 100 hands. The Titans were battered with stones by the Hecatoncheires, while the Cyclops gave Zeus their thunder and lightning weapons. The Titans were ultimately vanquished. Zeus imprisoned them in Tartarus and sentenced the rebel Atlas to carry the sky on his shoulders and stand at the edge of the universe forever. Gaia was furious that her Titan offspring had perished. She also gave birth to Typhus, a dragon with 100 heads that never slept. from her coupling with Tartarus. Most of the gods fled in terror, but Zeus was taken prisoner and imprisoned. Zeus, who had been freed by Hermes, finally killed the monster by repeatedly striking it with lightning and burying it beneath Mount Etna in Sicily. Another attempt was made to overthrow Zeus and the other Olympians from their position as world rulers. In an effort to conquer Olympus, the giants, who had grown from Uranus' blood, laid siege to it by stacking mountains on top of one another. To tame and destroy the giants, the gods' full might and Heracles' help from mortals were necessary. The Olympians' authority was unchallenged after their victories over the Titans, Typhus the dragon, and the giants. That creation's rendition was mostly based on a poem by Greek poet Hesiod, who lived in the 7th century BC. Here, though, is an earlier tale for comparison. The goddess of all creation, Eurynome, emerged from the chaos and divided the sky from the sea. After creating the wind by rubbing it between her hands to create a serpent Ophion, who made love to her, she continued dancing naked on the waves. Eurynome, who was pregnant, transformed into a dove and laid the world egg, which Ophion coiled around and eventually hatched. Everything in the universe and the cosmos were born from this egg. Then Eurynome and Ophion relocated to Olympus, but their marriage did not work out. Eurynome exiled Ophion to the underworld after he proclaimed himself the creator. Eurynome finally created the 7 planets, each ruled by a titan and titaness. When man first arose, he emerged from the ground, and Pelasgus, the first man, taught the others to eat acorns, build huts, and make a rude garment. The original creation is quite primitive and macho, and the fundamental forces produce their polar opposites. Thus, the first crime generates a goddess of love, while emptiness creates solidity, darkness makes lights, and the earth creates the sky and the sea. Additionally, these forces are said to have sexes and reproduce in a manner similar to that of humans. The female components give birth to younger forces, and those forces have hazy personalities. Gaia and her daughter Rhea serve one vital purpose besides having children. They assist their sons in ousting their own husbands out of rage. Mistreating one's children is the key to losing control of the globe in the difficult connection between the sexes. The creation is made dramatic and accessible by presenting the powers of nature in terms of the human family. The desire for control and power, though, stands out as the myth's most remarkable characteristic. The strongest of Uranus' children are kept in Gaia's belly. The new generation of Titans takes control after Cronus castrates his father. Then Cronus establishes his dominance by seizing control of his own children and locking up his non-Titan brethren. He is overthrown by Zeus, who then has to battle the Titans, the dragons, and the giants to establish his own authority. In one tale, Thetis forewarns Zeus that a potential offspring may one day overthrow him. Here, the main force is power. This outlook, however, is not entirely negative because every generation of deities represent a development over the previous one, and the gods of Olympia under Zeus, the Indo-European invaders gods, especially Zeus, are believed to have replaced the Titans as the ancient Greek gods. But the crucial aspect of this tale is how conflict is revealed to be a universal law. The only way for the victor, be they gods or men, to establish their dominance is through solitary combat, which is how the world advances. And ultimately, the validity of that superiority is constantly in doubt. Who retains power is decided through force. However, this conflict-centered perspective on the world gave Greek civilization a very dramatic personality. The early Pelasgian version of the creation is specifically deficient in drama. There, a female deity is revered above all others, potentially illustrative of a matriarchal society. When Ophion asserts his claim to be the creator, Eurynome brutally disposes of him in a fun manner. She is self-sufficient and can survive without a male god. From the birth of Uranomi until the creation of man, everything in this narrative appears to have happened by chance. Beyond the playfulness and zest of the female gender, there is no overarching concept that play here. Given the two origin stories, it is simple to understand why Hesiod's version became more popular, because it was based on a race of warriors. So for the 5 ages of man, Prometheus, and the flood, due to their continued neutrality in the conflict between the Olympians and the Titans, the wise Titan Prometheus and his foolish brother Epimetheus were spared imprisonment in Tartarus. According to one myth, Prometheus created man from mud, and Athena gave the clay creation life. But once man was born, Prometheus gave his clumsy brother Epimetheus permission to impart various traits to both animals and men. Thus, Epimetheus started by imparting the best qualities to the animals: quickness, courage, cunning, stealth, and the like. And by the time he was finished, he had nothing left to impart to man. Prometheus took charge of the situation and gave humans an erect posture, similar to that of the gods. He was able to survive thanks to this gift. Since the Olympians had consigned his fellow Titans to Tartarus, Prometheus had little affection for them. He was primarily fond of men. Now, when the offering an animal as a sacrifice to the gods, man was to give some of the animal to the gods and some to himself. Zeus had a choice. Prometheus then created 2 piles. He concealed the meat beneath the unsightly hide and covered the bones in succulent fat. To his ire, Zeus picked the fat-wrapped bones. As vengeance, Zeus denied man access to fire. However, Prometheus was unstoppable. He carried his torches back to earth after ascending to heaven and lighting them at the sun. When Zeus noticed that the man had fire, he became furious. He handed Hephaestus the task of creating a stunningly beautiful mortal, and after Hephaestus finished, the gods showered this new creation with gifts. Hermes, however, gave it a dishonest heart and a liar's tongue. The first lady was named Pandora, and no greater tragedy ever befell man. Epimetheus had been advised by Prometheus not to accept his gift from Zeus. Epimetheus, however, was powerless to rebuff Pandora when he first beheld her. She had taken a jar with her, which was not allowed to open, but because she was a woman, her curiosity won. A plethora of ills flew out as she lifted the lid, spreading around the earth to afflict people. Still, there was one ray of hope left for man in the jar. Hope was the only thing that could save humanity from the sorrow that Pandora had wrought. Zeus has set out a specific punishment for Prometheus. Zeus was enraged by the sacrifice deception and the fire theft, but he was also enraged because he knew that Prometheus held the key to the god who would eventually dispose him. Prometheus refused to reveal the secret in defiance. Zeus bound Prometheus to a mountain in Caucasus and sent an eagle there every day to peck out the Titan's liver, which would then regrow at night, and it took months for this pain to subside. He could only be freed from the rock if 2 things happened. First, an immortal had to die in sacrifice to Prometheus, and second, an ordinary person had to kill the eagle and free him. The centaur Chiron eventually consented to die for him. Another legend holds that man was created by the gods and that he lived on earth under the authority of the Titan Cronus. The original human race was completely content, and men were not burdened by suffering, labor, or old age during the Golden Age. It was as simple as going to sleep to die. They abundantly ate the fruits of the soil, and once the race perished, these people stayed on as spirits to keep men safe from harm. The inferior men of the Silver Age were then produced by the gods. For a century, these guys were controlled by their moms as children. and when they did ultimately reach maturity, their folly caused them to quickly disappear. Men had to labor in this era, and the seasons were defined so that men could recognize cold and heat. Zeus ended this race because it was the beginning of crime and immorality. Zeus then made the Bronze Age men from ash spears. They were a fierce race of warriors who worked with metal and created some primitive forms of civilization. These men were strong, tall, and fierce. These men's war ultimately led to their own destruction. The heroic age which followed was a time of illustrious heroes and exploits. There were then heroes of the Trojan War, including Heracles, Jason, Theseus, and others. And Zeus created the Elysian fields as a memorial to them and a place for the spirits to rest after passing away. Zeus, who was undeterred, went on to create the Iron Age men, the most evil race to ever inhabit the planet, and one that was destined to become completely perverted. This gang of men, which still exists, had to put up with a lot of struggle, suffering, and tiredness. The gods will finally completely give up on this terrible race, leaving it in excruciating pain. At one point, Zeus was so repulsed by man and its impious, terrible ways that he made the decision to wipe out the entire species with a deluge. Deucalion was advised by his father Prometheus, who was still at large, to construct a chest. Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha boarded the chest, which was filled with supplies, as the rain started to fall and sailed over the ocean that swallowed the rest of the planet. The chest finally came to rest on Mount Parnassus after 10 days of flooding. When they came out, Deucalion and Pyrrha sacrificed something to Zeus and pleaded with him to revive the human race. Additionally, the pair traveled to Delphi to pray to Titaness of Justice, who instructed them to cast. They were initially perplexed by this order, but Deucalion had an idea. Since the earth had given birth to mankind, his mother's bones must be among the stones that lay on the surface. They changed into man as Deucalion began to throw stones behind him, into a woman as Pyrrha began to throw stones behind her. The human race was reborn in this way. Hesiod, who described the world's origins, is the source of many elements of these traditions. Every legend shares the name of humanity's fragility in the face of devastation. By being impious or bloodthirsty, man can sometimes bring disaster upon himself, while other times it may be the consequence of uncontrollable external factors. Here, Zeus is shown as a vengeful deity who punishes man for both his own transgressions and those of Prometheus. Of course, Prometheus is a hero and a friend to humanity. He is the tenacious rebel against Zeus's dreadful power, and he deserves a lot of respect for making a personal sacrifice on behalf of humanity. Even his deception regarding the sacrifice is regarded as commendable. The Greeks of antiquity valued cunning and deception, and many of their deities and heroes have a talent for trickery. The Pandora narrative shows a dual attitude towards women while also being a slur on them. They are both impossible to resist, and the root of all this, or rather of all of men's problems. Only a culture dominated by men could produce such a tale. A subjugated Texas natural weapons are the qualities that are emphasized as being inherent in women, such as a deceitful heart and a lying tongue. The story of the 5 ages of man demonstrates a profound pessimism about the advancement of man. Every new race of man is inferior to the previous one, but every new generation of gods is superior than the previous one. Mankind deteriorates through time. No narrative could be more in opposition to our nearly widespread conviction that man evolved from savagery into civilization. Whatever the case, the story captures the notion of the paradisiacal state of early man, which also underlies the biblical account of Eden. The account of Noah is the biblical equivalent to the story of the flood. This myth is widely believed. Exists as many forms all across the world, and the common belief that the geological changes occur gradually contradicts with the assumption that the flood would virtually wipe out of all the humanity. However, the myth of the flood displays a faith in the cataclysmic forces of nature, forces that, if the gods so choose, can wipe out mankind. The tragic dynasties in Greek mythology. For this video, I will just talk about Crete, so Minos' house. There were two Cretan rulers by the name of Minos, the first of which was his father. Because of his progressive policies, Minos the first, a son of Zeus and Europa, saw Crete develop into the largest naval force in the Mediterranean. He promoted trade, built substantial public works, established a strong judicial system, started an educational system, and supported the development of the arts. His knowledge helped Crete develop into a significant civilization. When Minos I and Rhadamanthus died, they were appointed judges in the underworld. Their brother Rhadamanthus was equally renowned for his righteous rule. Unlike his father, Minos II was conceited and self-centered. According to legend, he pursued the maid Britomartis so obstinately that she jumped off a cliff to her death rather than submit to him. Zeus once punished Minos by forbidding him from having a sexual relationship with any woman. But the exiled Procreus, who created a female figure that drew the poison from Minos while he laid with it, healed him. The majority of the children Minos fathered on Pasiphae, his queen, were doomed to failure. So Theseus abandoned Ariadne. Phaedra murdered herself. Catreus was killed by his own son. Androgeus was killed by the bull Marathon, which ignited the Athens War. And Glaucus drowned in a vat of honey, despite the prophet Polyidus' use of a miraculous herb to bring him back to life. These fatalities and mishaps were Minos' fault. It was clear. He had a talent for drawing trouble. He prayed to Poseidon in order to receive a bull for sacrifice. When he dedicated a temple to the god, a magnificent white bull as a reward from Poseidon, but Minos chose to help it for himself and sacrifice another bull in its place. The wife of Minos, Pasiphae, was made to fall in love with a magnificent bull as a result of a plan Poseidon made to punish this crime. The inventor Daedalus was informed of Pasiphae's devotion, and he created a wooden cow to hide her. In this way, the couple's union was complete, and Pasiphae gave birth to the Minotaur, and the creature with a bull's head and a man's body. Minos commissioned Daedalus to construct a massive palace with innumerable rooms and perplexing pathways in order to conceal its abomination. When this labyrinth was finished, Minos and his household staff moved in, and the Minotaur was placed in the palace's lowest area. The only people who had the key to his huge facility were Minos and Daedalus. King Agis of Athens informed Minos one day that his son, Androgeus, had been killed by the bull of Marathon. Minos was skeptical of the news and thought it was a political ruse. In order to defeat Athens and its allies, he launched an expedition. Minos won Scylla's affection by laying siege to the town of Megara, the daughter of King Nisus. Nisus was immune to harm since he was dependent on a purple hairlock on his forehead to survive. Knowing the secret, Scylla cut off the lock to betray her father and her city. Minos was far from appreciative of the lovesick girl's request for him to take her home with him. Instead, he erupted into a frenzy. By pulling Scylla by her feet through the water as a kind of retribution, he drowned her. After taking Megara, Minos invaded Athens and forced the city to submit. Then he required that every 9 years a tribute of 7 maidens and 7 youths be offered as a sacrifice to the Minotaur. As soon as the second installment of human beings was due, Minos developed an aversion towards the young Theseus. He challenged Theseus with an unbeaten gigantic boxer, and the giant lost. Ariadne, fell in love with Theseus after receiving the trophy of flowers from him and pledged to aid him. He invoked Daedalus, a fellow Athene like Theseus. Daedalus had to flee to Crete after killing his nephew, an apprentice who was more competent than him, in a fit of envy. However, he was homesick and determined to help his neighbor. After killing the Minotaur, he gave Theseus the thread to use to escape the palace. Theseus abandoned Ariadne and Naxos while fleeing, setting fire to the palace and sinking a significant amount of Minos' navy. Knowing that Daedalus had aided Theseus, Minos was enraged and put the inventor and his son in jail. For himself and his son Icarus, Daedalus created 2 pairs of wings with a wooden frame and feathers adhered to wax as a means to escape. The inventor warned his son against flying too high or too low, since the water would damage the wings or the sun would melt the wax. Daedalus then took the lead as the two ascended the sky. Icarus got enamored with his newfound abilities of flying before they had traveled very far, and he started to soar to gain a better view of the Aegean Sea. Icarus recklessly flew dangerously close to the sun, which melted the wax, keeping the feathers together, causing him to crash into the water and drown. Daedalus eventually sought sanctuary with Cocalus, the king of Sicily. Daedalus built an impregnable castle in his new exile location. When Minos finally made it to Cocalus' court, he had been seeking for the traitor who had undermined him. He brought a complicated spiral shell, and he offered a prize to the person who could thread it. Cocalus took the shell, delivered it to Daedalus, who threaded it in the spiral maze by attaching a string to an ant. Cocalus gave the shell back, and when he did, Minos realized he had located Daedalus and wanted the runaway. Cocalus acclimatized, and as Minos was taking a bath that evening, Cocalus' daughter splashed hot water on him, causing him to pass away. Cocalus' castle was under siege by the Cretans for a number of years, but to no avail. The Cretan throne was transferred to others since Minos' son went away before him. There was a significant amount of poetic justice in the tales of Minos II and Daedalus. When Minos withholds the sacred bull, his wife transforms into a beast, embarrassing him. Minos appears to have summoned the treachery of his own daughter Ariadne, as well as Theseus' abandonment of her by slaying Scylla, who had deserted her father and home for him. Theseus, who kills the Minotaur, sets fire to the palace and destroys his ships, is attracted to his court by his demand that Athens pay an unfair tribute of human victims. Daedalus is forced to pay for killing his own nephew by being banished. Losing his only son and serving as an honored slave for others, these events are not random occurrences. Rather, they represent the application of moral principle that stipulates that transgressions must be atoned for in same manner. The Greeks understood that a character's fate is determined by it. However, these myths hint at a reality that goes beyond the purely individual. They provide a streamlined narrative of the development and demise of the civilization in Crete. When Sir Arthur Evans dug in Knossos in the beginning of the century, he discovered a maze-like palace and a wealth of proof of a glorious culture. However, a knowledge of how a civilization develops and changes may have seen in Cretan mythology. In his unselfish dedication to building a magnificent civilization, Minos I submerges his ego. A kingdom led by such a ruler is likely to succeed. To the detriment of Crete and his own family, Minos II nevertheless demonstrates his personality. He displeases two important deities, commands his navy on personal vengeance missions, constructs a pricey palace for himself, and invites loss by levying a monstrous tribute upon Athens. Here, Theseus is seen from a new perspective, less as the dashing hero and more as Minos' humiliator and a cataclysm of Crete's decline. A king as egotistical as Minos II appears likely to lead to the collapse of a small nation with scarce resources, and money and power frequently produce leaders of similar caliber. Although there is no way for us to know for sure, these traditions give it the appearance that Crete's decline was caused by ineffective leadership. A people's morale and ability to fend off invaders could be swiftly destroyed by kings with brazen arrogance. So I could talk about Mycenae, that's Atreus' house, and for the third one, it would be in Thebes, that would be Cadmus' house. And then we have Athens, Erichthonius' house. So I could talk about them all. Sorry about that. But it would take long, and it could be for another video. So if you're interested with any of those, please let me know. However, I do have some thoughts about Mycenae or Cadmus' house. These myths speak of Thebes' creation, struggles, and demise. Similar to the tales of Crete, the success of the city is generally influenced by the caliber of its leadership. However, in the case, we observe a strain of innocence and unjust suffering that is absent from the other tragic dynasties. Why Oedipus unwittingly carried out the terrible prophecy, why Antigone and Haemon should perish for carrying out the gods' will, and why Cadmus and Harmonia had such a difficult old age, are all puzzling questions because in each case the suffering seems unjustified or out of proportion to its causes. In his tragic works, Sophocles addressed the stories of Oedipus and Antigone, and he did so head-on. He can only conclude by stating that unjust suffering defies human comprehension, and that the ways of heaven are not those of men. Sophocles, despite his inability to comprehend the gods, continues to believe in them. More importantly, though, he continues to believe in men who are capable of withstanding great pain without losing their humanity. The narrative of Oedipus's death and transfiguration, in which Oedipus received a special pardon from the gods after enduring cruel fate, best illustrates this. A different kind of hero is Oedipus, and he may be brave, clever, and smart, but his most remarkable quality is his capacity for suffering. After falling into a fatal trap laid by the gods, he takes responsibility for the misdeeds he unknowingly committed by going blind and abdicating his crown. He is then put through a prolonged anguish and eventually comes out of it pure. So, another new kind of heroine is Antigone, who accepts death as her punishment while upholding divine justice and family obligations at the expense of the state. The Greeks were only people who could have established or understood the family because they were unwavering and intellectually honest. So I do have comments with Erichthonius' house too. and Atreus's house as well. Just to correct myself, for the second set of comments that I had, it was for Cadmus's house, not Mycenae. But anyway, that is for that is for the tragic dynasties in Greek mythology. Let me know if you want to hear about the other houses, other places, and that's it for this video. For this video, we will talk about the heroes in Greek mythology. Heracles, Perseus, and Bellerophon. Without an heir to succeed him when he passed away, King Acrisius ruled over Argos. Girls were not given much weight back then, despite the fact that Dana, his only child, was a pretty maiden. When Acrisius sought advice from an oracle, it was revealed that while he would not have a son, his own grandson would murder him. In order to prevent his daughter from having children, the monarch, who was extremely frightened, had an underground cell with a skylight erected. Zeus visited Dana in the shape of a golden shower. Nevertheless, after spotting her in her bronze chamber, Perseus, a son, was born to her 9 months later. After learning about this, Acrisius was hesitant to execute them both immediately. Zeus, on the other hand, noticed Dana's beauty while she was in her bronze chamber and paid her a visit by sending a golden shower. She gave birth to a boy named Perseus 9 months later, and then when Acrisius learned of this, he refrained from killing them both immediately and ordered his daughter and grandchild to be imprisoned in a chest and cast into the ocean. The chest eventually came to rest on an island beach where it was discovered and opened by a fisherman by the name of Dictys. Dictys, who was kind-hearted, took the helpless Dana and her young son to his wife's house. Given that they were childless themselves, the couple made the decision to take the care of Dana and nurture Perseus as if he were their own son. As a result, Perseus enjoyed a comfortable upbringing as he matured. With age, Dana did not lose her beauty, and Dictys' brother, the despotic ruler Polydectes, desired to wed her. However, Polydectes saw Perseus was an impediment to his ambitions. He thus made the announcement that he was getting married to a different woman, requiring everyone to give him a gift. Perseus was the only person present at the Feast of Gifts who had nothing to give the king. In his humiliation, Perseus hastily vowed to return with a Gorgon Medusa's head as a present. Knowing that Perseus would fail, Polydectes was happy because men turned to stone at the sight of that horrifying snake-headed creature. Additionally, Polydectes would own a prize trophy even if Perseus were to triumph. Inconsolable over having to say goodbye to his mothers and foster parents, Perseus left the king's court right away and sailed for Greece. While the oracle at Delphi was unable to provide him with information regarding the location of the Gorgons, it did send him to Dodona and the home of the Whispering Trees. There, Perseus only discovered that the gods were protecting him. Perseus eventually encountered the gods Hermes, who instructed him to obtain certain equipment from the Stygian nymphs. His success would depend on having a pair of flying sandals, a magic mallet, and an invisibility helmet. However, the Stygian nymphs would only be reached by the Graeae, or 3 gray women. These 3 crones, who lived far to the west beyond the river ocean, each had only one eye. When one of the gray women was handing that one eye to another, Perseus sprang from behind and grabbed it. Hermes had led the young hero to them. The Graea revealed to him where the Stygian nymphs dwelt in exchange for their eye. Once more Hermes led him there, and they took the sandals, mallet, and helmet as collateral. Hermes, who also sent Perseus a highly sharp sickle to use to cut off the head of Medusa. Perseus also benefited from Athena's assistance because she helped him discern between the three hideous Gorgons, only Medusa of which could be slain. In addition, the goddess gave Perseus a shield that resembled a mirror so that he could see the Gorgons without being instantly petrified. The hero was finally prepared to face the Medusa after this protracted preparation. He took to the air in his winged sandals and went to the Hyperborean homeland, where he discovered the sleeping Gorgons. Perseus approached them while looking into his mirror-covered shield. He struck off the huge head with a single strike as Athena directed his hand. Pegasus, the equine with wings, and a fearsome warrior both emerged from the blood of Medusa. Perseus quickly put the head in his magic mallet and put on the invisibility helmet. He did it just in time as the other two Gorgons awoke right away. After discovering their sister had been killed, they set out to find and kill her killer. But because he could fly without being noticed, Perseus had no issue escaping them. He moved eastward over Libya and Egypt after moving south to Gibraltar. He came across a stunning naked young woman chained to a rock along Philistia's coastline. This was the Princess Andromeda, who was about to be killed by a sea monster because her foolish, conceited mother had said she was more beautiful than the Nereids or sea nymphs. She captured Perseus' heart, and he quickly made arrangements with her parents so that if he could save her, she would become his wife. Perseus cut off the monster's head when it materialized in order to set Andromeda free. Her parents, however, broke their promise and asserted that a prior suitor had a superior claim to their daughter. They also called forth warriors. They also called forth warriors to murder the hero. When Perseus realized he had too many foes, he pulled the bloody head out of his wallet and turned them into stone. Among them were Andromeda's parents, Cepheus and Cassiopeia, who were punished for their betrayal by becoming constellations. However, Perseus had married someone. His mother, Dana, and his guardian Dictys had fled to a temple for safety from the courting and vengeance of the king Polydictus. When he and her returned to the island where he had been nurtured, when Perseus arrived in the king's banquet hall, he discovered Polydictus and his friends enjoying a feast. After being insulted, he gave the king the head of Medusa as a present and turned Polydictus and the others into stones. Athena received the Aegis head to wear on her breastplate as payment from Perseus for her assistance. He also used Hermes to deliver the sandals, wallet, and helmet back to the Stygian nymphs. Perseus appointed the Dictys as the island's new ruler before settling sail with his mother and his wife for his grandfather's kingdom in Argos. King Acrisius, and whom he had wanted to make amends, no longer controlled the area after realizing that the grandson who would kill him was a hero. Soon after, Perseus learned that the king of Larissa would be holding an athletic contest, so he made the decision to participate. During the discus throw, Perseus' discus was deflected toward the crowd of the spectators by the wind, killing an elderly man there. Naturally, the victim was King Acrisius, who had trapped Dana and Perseus in a chest and sent them out to the sea years later. The oracle was thus realized. Perseus, who was plagued by guilt over the murder of the relatives, set up a trade with an uncle, exchanging Argos for Tiryns. He strengthened his city as a king and reclaimed lost lands, and after getting married to Andromeda, had several sons. He became the great Heracles' ancestor as a result of them. The home of Bellerophon's family was in Corinth. For spying on Zeus, his grandfather Sisyphus was doomed to roll a boulder up a hill in the underworld for all eternity. All the command of Aphrodite, his father Glaucus, who made horses ferocious by feeding them human flesh, was crushed and consumed by those very horses. Additionally, Bellerophon himself had a bad start. He accidentally killed his own brother while killing Belarus, a townmate. Following his exile, Bellerophon made his way to King Proteus' court. The Gorgon's young man was the object of desire for Proteus' wife, who made overtures to him but was rebuffed. In retaliation, she claimed Bellerophon had attempted to rape her in front of her husband. King Proteus sent Bellerophon to his father-in-law, King Lobatus, with a request of the Bellerophon to be put to death, since he did not want to harm a visitor because of the fear of Zeus's judgment. Bellerophon was highly received in Lobatus' court. Lobatus Iobates welcomed him as a guest and then requested to view the sealed letter. Iobates was equally as horrified upon opening it as Proteus had been, for he too could not murder a visitor. However, Iobates made the quick decision to send Bellerophon on perilous missions that would surely kill him. Bellerophon's obsession at the time was to own Pegasus, the winged horse that had been created from the blood of Medusa. He slept in the temple of Athena after receiving wise instruction, and when he awoke, a golden bridle was lying next to him. He entered the pastures with his bridle and found the Pegasus drinking from a spring. Bellerophon had no trouble mounting the horse or placing the bridle on it. He and the Pegasus performed amazing maneuvers while gliding through the skies while wearing his armor. He felt prepared to take on whatever missions that King Iobates had in mind thanks to his new mount. The Chimera, a fearsome fire-breathing creature with the head of the lion, the body of the goat, and the tail of the serpent, was his first assignment. Riding the Pegasus and firing arrows at the Chimera from the air, Bellerophon assaulted the beast. He held the beast's mouth with a lance that had a chunk of lead on its end. The lead was melted by the scorching tongue, and when it trickled down into the Chimera's stomach, it killed him. The Ptolemy, Iobates' adversaries, were next sent up against Bellerophon, but they were no match for his airborne assault with boulders. The Amazons were also sent by the monarch, and the hero used the same strategy to destroy them. Iobates, who was at his wits' end, set up an ambuscade for Bellerophon on his way home. But once more the attack was thwarted. After trying in vain to kill the extraordinary young man, Iobates learned to respect him for his bravery and gave Bellerophon his daughter as a wife. Bellerophon's success, nevertheless, was short-lived. Bellerophon decided that because of his illustrious deeds, he belonged on Olympus after numerous years of living comfortably. He mounted Pegasus and flew across the air. Zeus, however, became enraged by this mortal's arrogance and dispatched a glad fly to sting Pegasus under the tail. Bellerophon was knocked to the ground when his horse bolted. The wretched hero, lame and condemned by the gods, kept himself entirely apart from the company of men. He was consumed by pain and died after living a fugitive lifestyle. Zeus had captured Pegasus in the interim and was using it to transport thunderbolts inside of his own stable. Heracles, also known by his Latin name Hercules, was the most mighty and illustrious hero of them all. He was an extremely strong and well-balanced man who was capable of superhuman exploits. However, given that he was Zeus's son and that Zeus had planned for Hercules to one day become a god, it came as little surprise. He served the gods by helping them battle the giants and to rescue Prometheus from his punishment in the Caucasus. He was a defender, friend, and advisor to mortals. Greece revered Hercules, or Heracles, and in recognition of his athletic skill, he founded the Olympic Games. Alcmene, the wife of Amphitryon, a woman known for her morality, beauty, and intellect, was the final mortal woman Zeus ever slept with. Zeus had chosen her not particularly for his own amusement, but rather because she was the best candidate for giving birth to history's greatest hero. He wanted his final encounter to be truly unforgettable. Zeus visited Alcmene in the disguise of her husband and stayed with her for one very long night while regaling her with the tales of his exploit, while Amphitryon was away waging a battle. Soon after, when the real Amphitryon got home, he was shocked by his wife's lack of interest and her disinterest when he talked about his military exploits. Even though they were lying together, she seemed bored. Alcmene was set to give birth to twins 9 months later. Zeus swore solemnly that the Perseus descendant born on the day Heracles should have been born would rule Greece on the day Heracles should have been born. Hera used magic during a jealous outburst to delay Alcmene's delivery and hasten the birth of a woman carrying another of Perseus's children. As a result, Eurystheus, the child, rather than Hercules or Heracles, was destined to rule Greece. But in his rage, Zeus forced Hera to accept that Heracles would become a god if he completed Eurystheus' 12 duties. Heracles, the son of Zeus, and Iphicles, the son of Amphitryon, were both born to Alcmene. Hera dispatched 2 serpents to kill Heracles in his cot while these twins were around a year old. Heracles strangled the snakes, one in each hand, as Iphicles shrieked and attempted to flee. Heracles was never much of a thinker in school, preferring the athletic disciplines, which he quickly mastered. Given 2 hasty actions, he used the lyre to brain his music instructor. Amphitryon then dispatched him with herders into the hills. He was the strongest guy in the world, the best athlete, and a hero with incredible courage by the time he was 18. He was typically a courteous person, but when provoked, he was prone to violent rages that he occasionally regretted. Heracles set out to find the lion that was slaughtering Amphitryon's livestock. He had the pleasure of sleeping with King Thespius' 50 daughters during his first trip, with his father's approval. 51 sons were born from these matings. Finally, Heracles dispatched the lion. He fashioned a cape and a hood out of it. He was typically seen wielding the olive wood club he used to kill the lion while wearing his lion skin outfit. Thebes was compelled to pay tribute to the Minian ruler as atonement. When Heracles encountered the heralds who had come to collect his tribute, he found them to be rude, so he hacked off their hands, noses, and ears before sending them on their way. This sparked a conflict in which the minions prevailed, but Heracles helped the Thebans beat their adversaries with the power of Athena and his own reckless audacity. King Creon gave the hero his daughter Megara as a wife as a reward, but Heracles' recklessness wasn't much tamed by marriage. He was unaffected even by the task of rearing boys. As a result, Hera unleashed a frenzy of madness upon him, which led to the savage murder of his wife and children. He was filled with horror and guilt. When he finally realized what had happened, he considered suicide despite of the pitiful consolation offered by his friend Theseus and the others. In order to find out how he could atone for his transgressions, he finally visited the oracle at Delphi. According to the oracle, he would have to serve as a slave for King Eurystheus of Mycenae and carry out any orders given by his royal cousin. Eurystheus had the cleverness while being far less courageous and powerful than Heracles, and he created a series of trials that were nearly difficult to execute. The heroes served the vengeful monarch for 12 years, doing these 12 labors of Heracles. The first task was to dispatch the impenetrable skinned Nemean lion. Heracles attempted to kill the beast with arrows in vain before killing it with his bare hands and bringing it back to Mycenae. Then Eurystheus made the decision that Heracles would stay outside the city. His second task was to exterminate the Lernaean Hydra, a nine-headed serpent with deadly breath that resided in wetlands and disseminated livestock and crops. Hercules tried to club the Hydra's heads off once he had forced it from its den, but two grew in their place for every one that did. Heracles was able to defeat the monster with the aid of his nephew Laulos, who branded the monster's severed necks. He tainted his arrows with the Hydra's blood. I could talk about the other labors of Hercules, but I think that's for another video. So there are three heroes that are known for taking down monsters in Perseus, Bellerophon, and Heracles. Perseus, Bellerophon, and Heracles. Medusa, the Gorgon, was slain by Perseus, Chimera by Bellerophon, and the Hydra by Heracles, among other creatures. But each is unique. Perseus is a guy of loyalty to his family and his friends, a formidable foe to those who offend him, and a person blessed by the gods to carry one great deed. He is both elegant and impulsive. Bellerophon is a murderer who has the good fortune to tame Pegasus and therefore achieve all of his successes. He is violent and careless. However, the reason for his victories is also the reason for his failure, since Pegasus throws him while he is trying to reach Olympus. Even though Heracles is impulsive and violent, he has the humility to acknowledge his wrongdoing and seek atonement through hard labor. Heracles also lacked true understanding, had to prove his valor via strength and skill alone. He is an example of unbridled masculinity because he has fathered roughly 80 sons on various women, killed tyrants, monsters, and regular men equally, tamed wild animals, and served time in prison for misdeeds. Each hero of these tales is indebted to a king when he does his greatest deeds, which is a characteristic that unites them all. Due to necessity, their commitment to it, and their sense of honor, Perseus, Bellerophon, and Heracles each receive their heroic distinctions. Honor inherently motivates bravery, yet it can also push a man to commit hasty crimes. Examples of heroes who violated the bounds of human decency out of pride include Bellerophon ascending Olympus and Heracles slaying Iphictus. Due to the fact that it frequently appears in their myths, the Greeks were constantly aware of this duality in heroes. For this video, we'll be talking about Greek mythology, the Trojan War. The preliminaries, the war scores, the fall of Troy, and the returns. Troy was a powerful, prosperous city under the authority of King Priam. In addition to being wealthy, he had at least 50 children, and it appeared that luck would continue to favor him and his offerings for a very long time. Hecuba, his wife, had a nightmare in which she had a deadly firebrand as a child. This was understood by the seers to signify that her unborn child would exterminate Troy's populace. The newborn was abandoned on Mount Ida, when it was born, but a she-bear nursed it, and it lived to become a shepherd named Alexander or Paris. Enon, a nymph, became Paris' lover. The gods were having a good time at Peleus and Thetis' wedding when Ares, also known as Strife, flung a golden apple into their midst with the inscription, "For the loveliest." Zeus correctly declined the request for him to select two should receive the apple among Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, instead referring to them to a shepherd on Mount Ida who would be able to determine who was the most attractive. Paris was contacted by the goddesses, who each gave her a bribe in exchange for choosing her. He was promised by Hera to become a powerful monarch who would govern Asia. He may have insight and unstoppable bravery in battle, according to Athena's offer. However, Aphrodite obtained the fruit by promising Paris the stunning Helen, the most beautiful woman in the entire world. He made implacable enemies in Hera and Athena, who both promised to kill him in Troy. Thus his decision was, to put it mildly, foolish. Paris initially went to Troy and established himself as a real prince, the legitimate son of Priam and Hecuba, after discovering that he would possess Helen. He left Oenon behind, since he was no longer interested in her. Then he set sail for Sparta, where he wooed Helen while her husband was away before bringing her back to Troy. Cassandra, the sister of Paris, was having problems at the same time. She had signed a vow of chastity, so she rebuffed Apollo's advances while he tried to make love to her and gave her the gift of prophecy. Apollo was so furious that he made it so that no one would believe her, turning his gift into a curse. When Paris and Helen returned and stood before Priam to ask his father's approval, Cassandra entered the chamber, imagined everything that would happen as a result of Paris in his lust, let out dejected shrieks, and yelled at her immoral brother. Priam had Cassandra imprisoned in a cell in the place because he thought she was insane. Menelaus, the Greek chiefs to accompany him on his campaigns to conquer Troy and rescue Helen, after discovering her missing upon his return to Sparta. These chiefs had vowed to support Menelaus because, like Helen, they had courted him and had sworn to avenge any disgrace she could have brought upon him. Thus Paris sparked the Trojan War, fulfilling his mother's prophecy that she would have a firebrand child who would burn Troy to the ground. Agamemnon, Menelaus' brother, presided over the gathering of the Greek kings in Aulis. The majority of the soldiers eagerly wanted to leave burning and sacking Troy. However, two heroes were hesitant. Odysseus pretended to be insane when the Greek authorities came for him, because an oracle said that if he went, he would be away from home for 20 years. Odysseus had to leave after Palamedes uncovered the trick. Achilles' assistance was necessary for the Greeks to capture Troy, so they traveled to Scyros to retrieve him. Since his mother, the nymph Thetis, had dipped him in the river of Styx at birth, making him immortal everywhere but in his heel, where she had kept him, Achilles was almost invulnerable as a combatant. He was taught by Chiron and grew into a fierce and very quick fighter. Thetis dressed her courageous son in woman's garb at the Scaean court because she knew he would die a brief but glorious death if he traveled to Troy. But Odysseus accidentally came into Achilles, and he too agreed to go. The Greeks initially sailed to Mysia and started a battle there because they thought it was Troy. In the conflict, Achilles hurt Telephus, a ruler of Mysia. When the Greeks realized their mistake, they sailed back to Aulis. Achilles was required to treat his victim, since an oracle had predicted that Troy could not be taken without Telephus' guidance. When unfavorable winds came impossible for the Greeks to sail, the renegade Trojan prophet Calchas, who had sided with the Greeks, claimed that the goddess Artemis demanded the sacrifice of a virgin. Iphigenia, the daughter of Agamemnon, was selected and sent for under the guise that she would wed Achilles. She yet consented to being sacrificed for the Greek because, however, some claim that Artemis transported her to the Taran homeland while substituting a deer for her. The Greek expedition made it to Troy in any case. According to an oracle, the first person to land on Trojan territory would perish. Protesilaus took on this responsibility for himself, and was highly praised for it after being killed in a battle with Hector, the ruler of Troy. Hector, a formidable warrior, served as Troy's backbone during the ensuing 10 years of conflict. Hector was aware that his city and himself were doomed, though. Troy may have been spared if his brother Troilus had lived to be 20, but Achilles killed the lad when he was just a teenager. One such notable defender for Troy was Aeneas, a friend from a nearby country, but the Greek army was stacked with champions. There were Diomedes and the two Ajaxes, in addition to Agamemnon, Menelaus, Nestor, Odysseus, and Achilles. The gods participated in the conflict as well, influencing the result of several engagements. Hera, Athena, Poseidon, Hermes, and Hephaestus supported the Greeks, while Apollo, Artemis, Ares, and Aphrodite supported the Trojans. While occasionally interfering, Zeus largely remained impartial while fully anticipating what would occur. After 9 years of conflict, the Greeks had succeeded in destroying numerous Troy-allied kingdoms in Asia Minor, but they had made little progress against Troy itself. Within the Greek camp, there was conflict. Odysseus was still harbored resentment at Palamedes, the man who had ruthlessly exposed his delusion as a fabrication. Odysseus falsely accused Palamedes of being a traitor after the latter blamed him for a failed foraging expedition. Palamedes, as a result, was stoned to death. But soon after, a more terrible argument started, this time between Agamemnon and Achilles. Agamemnon had kidnapped the daughter of an Apollo priest, as a war prize, and when her father arrived to demand payment, Agamemnon sent him away without her. The priest prayed to Apollo for vengeance, and Apollo responded by sending the Greeks a plague that resulted to many deaths. Agamemnon's return of Chryses was demanded by Achilles, who convened a council in response. Agamemnon consented angrily, but he insisted on taking the girl Briseis, Achilles' own prize, in her stead. If Athena hadn't stepped in, murder would have occurred. When Achilles finally chose to give up on Briseis, he did so out of wounded dignity and stopped fighting. This was a catastrophe for the Greeks because their successes up to that point had been the result of Achilles' might. Achilles requested his mother Thetis to ask Zeus for victories for the Trojans, which she duly accomplished. The Trojans launched a determined assault as soon as they realized Achilles and his gang of Myrmidons had stopped fighting. Then Agamemnon issued a ceasefire, wherein it was decided that Paris and Menelaus would engage in single battle in support of Helen. However, the fight ended in a draw because Aphrodite carried Paris back to Troy after seeing that he was losing and wrapping him in a supernatural cloud. Agamemnon demanded that the Trojans hand over Helen, while Menelaus combed the Trojan ranks for Paris. The willingness of the Trojans may have to put an end to the conflict. However, Hera wanted Troy to destroyed, so she sent Athena to end the ceasefire. The Trojan archer Pendarus was then convinced by Athena to shoot an arrow at Menelaus. Menelaus was slightly hit by the bullet, and the fighting quickly resumed amid a raging uproar. The more powerful Ajax and Diomedes engaged in inspired combat, slaughtering Trojans in huge numbers. Diomedes injured Aeneas and killed Pandarus, Aphrodite arrived to save her sons, Aeneas, but the goddess fled after being wounded by Diomedes in the wrist. Aeneas was then treated by Artemis after Apollo carried him off the field. Then Diomedes met Hector, who was riding on the bloodied Ares, the god of war. Although Athena gave Diomedes the courage to attack Ares, Diomedes was terrified that the Greeks withdrew as a result. Ares was hurt and screamed in pain before running to Olympus. Hector was instructed to go back to Troy and ask his mother Hecuba to present the hostile Athena with her most lovely garment as a sign of pity after being forced to flee. However, the goddess was not appeased by his gesture. Hector returned to the field and challenged Achilles to a duel after having a heartfelt talk with his wife Andromache and holding his little son Astyanax. Achilles declined. Ajax accepted the challenge and narrowly defeated Hector in the fight. The two warriors exchanged presents and then dispersed. Zeus ordered the other gods off the battlefield in order to keep his promise to Thetis, who had pleaded with him to rescue the Trojans. The Greeks suffered a severe defeat as a result. By evening, Hector's relentless attacks had nearly forced the Greeks back to their ships. Agamemnon was discouraged and contemplated giving up the siege of Troy. Nestor, however, who was elderly and wise, advised him to make peace with Achilles by returning braces and a large sum of money on top of that. Agamemnon's delegation was politely accepted by Achilles, who turned down the offer. He would only battle if he or his Myrmidons were in danger, since his honor was on the line. The predicament appeared hopeless. However, later that evening, Odysseus and Diomedes attacked the Trojan camp, killing many people, among them King Rhesus, and robbing them their horses. Agamemnon, Odysseus, and Diomedes suffered injuries. And the following day, when the Greeks were compelled to return to the shore, Hera decided to change the course of the conflict. She induced Zeus to forget the fight by making love to her using Aphrodite's enchanted girdle. Poseidon entered the battle when Zeus was involved and forced the Trojans to flee. Hector was knocked out by the boulder thrown by Ajax, which caused the Trojans to flee frantically to the city. After regaining his composure, Zeus observed the rout, threatened to punish Hera, and ordered Poseidon off the field. Hector received a boost of energy from Apollo as he assisted him. The Trojans would battle once more. The Greek barriers and the Greeks had constructed to guard the ships and were destroyed by the Trojans, with Hector leading the charge. But Proclus, Achilles' comrade, sought to convince his friend to fight after becoming extremely frightened, but Achilles refused. Then Patroclus entered the conflict wearing Achilles' armor. The Trojans were in a panic as Patroclus massacred them left and right, believing that Achilles was now engaged in combat. He arrived at Troy's walls, but as he attempted to scale them, Apollo knocked him unconscious. Then Patroclus was found by Hector, who killed him and stripped him of his magnificent armor. When Achilles learned of Patroclus' passing, he lost control and fell to the ground in a fit of grief. He had to be held. Hephaestus' new armor was handed to him by his mother Thetis, who was also forewarned him that he would soon die if he murdered Hector. Achilles, however, was adamant about killing Hector as well as numerous other Trojans. He officially reconciled with Agamemnon the following morning and started fighting right away. That day there was a terrible armed struggle. Even though Hector and Aeneas murdered numerous Greeks, they were powerless to halt Achilles' bloodlust. In actuality, the supernatural intervention was required to save both Aeneas and Hector. Achilles' terrible onslaught flooded the Scamander River with so many bodies that the water overflowed and nearly drowned him. The gods also fought among themselves as Poseidon provoked Apollo. Hera boxed Artemis' ears, and Athena killed Ares. Achilles eventually ran into Hector outside of Troy's walls. Hector lost confidence and fled from his adversary, circled the city 3 times. However, Athena tricked him by taking a position, and Achilles' lance pierced his throat. Achilles laughed mockingly when Hector begged him to let his parents ransom his body as he died. Then, as Hector's wife watched from the walls of Troy, Achilles seized Hector's body, fastened it to the back of his chariot, and brought it back to the Greek camp. So I could talk more about the end of this Trojan War, and I could also give my input on it. But let me know if you're interested in hearing about that, if you are interested to hear the rest of this story. Comment down below, like and subscribe. Let me know and I'll make another video. Thank you.